here at the Keycloak 25. The idea of the presentation is to talk about Agentic AI platform for enterprise IAM. We're going to cover the theory and the open standard behind the scenes and the implementation of the Agentic AI platform based on zero trust principles. Before jumping into the details, I would like to give a quick introduction about myself. Well, my name is Martin Besozzi. I'm from Argentina. I have been working in the identity space for almost 20 years. Nowadays, I'm a founder and identity and access manager architect. I'd like to talk about open standard, identity and access manager, authorization, and then in the last years, I moved towards agent, MCP, Agentic AI platforms. And in relation to Keycloak, well, I usually try to help within the Keycloak community. And I was one of the technical reviewers of the second edition of the Keycloak book, which I highly recommend. So let's jump into the presentation. Here's the agenda. We are going to cover a lot of things, starting by describing the general idea of GenAI and MCP. We're going to describe the Agentic AI and the MCP architecture. And then we're going to fully onboard the Agentic AI platform, the open standard that we ended up implementing, and my idea is to do like a quick demo about the platform. So GenAI ended up bringing autonomous decision and task execution within the platform. So we are going to hear a lot about MCP, which is a model context protocol, which is an open standard that allow to the agent to interact with external tools or resources. So my view on the new platform that you will end up talking with an agent, and then the agent will end up acting in behalf of yourself, execution actions. So when you move toward that path, you end up having questions like who controls the agents, or should the agent have full access to the resource? The answer to those questions is the agent must follow the zero trust principle with dynamic and context-aware authorization. This is one of the topics that we're going to see today. The typical architecture that you will see a lot is the user, the agent with their LLM or AI model, and then the agent is talking with the tool, resource, and prompt based on MCP. In the slide, here is the typical Agentic AI and MCP architecture. So you have the user, then you end up having the host. The host runs the AI agent. The agent is, I'm simplifying the idea, but it's a software plus an LLM that orchestrates action and use tools. The AI agent ended up having the AI model, which is the language model instance that the agent ended up using. And then we move towards the MCP. So the MCP host has the MCP client that connects with the MCP server. The MCP server ended up exposing the tools, resources, and prompts towards the agent. And then in the last layer, we ended up having the API that is exposing the external data towards the MCP server. But the flow is as I said before, user, let's say MCP host agent, then the MCP server, and then the API that the MCP server ended up calling. Okay, before jumping into the open standard, MCP, OAuth, and the open standard that we're going to see today, for me it's super important to first clarify the scenario. So nowadays we have agent, that the agent could be like interactive agent on behalf of user agents or autonomous agent. So in our case, we are covering the on behalf user. So this is the first click. Then you move toward how many trust domain you ended up having. So in our scenario, we have a single trust domain. You can have multiple trust domain as well, but in our IAM enterprise case, we have access delegation and in a single trust domain. Then we can see that we are in a first-party IAM scenario, which means that the customer or corporation controls the Agentic AI stack. So in the Agentic AI stack, we have the Agentic AI platform plus the agent. We have the LLM, that in this case, we can run the LLM locally with GBDOSS. Then we have the MCP server, in our case, the Keycloak MCP server. And finally, we have the identity provider, which is Keycloak. Another point to have in mind. In this case, we are excluding the following point. We are not in an agent-to-agent scenario. We are in a single trust domain, which means that we don't have multiple IDP. And the idea of the presentation is to show at least one example of Agentic AI platform in an enterprise case. So my idea was to simplify the architecture, follow the open standard, the zero trust architecture. And again, I'm trying to simplify the idea here. Cool. So let's talk about a little bit about the standard that we're going to see today, just for this use case. Okay, OpenID Connect, everyone knows about that. It's an open standard for handling the authentication. Then on top of that, we are going to use OAuth 2.1. In the conference, I believe Takashi is going to talk about MCPs and OAuth 2. So you will find there a lot of details about the communication between the MCP, the flows, etc. My idea is to put focus in the Agentic AI scenario. So here we have OAuth 2.1 as the access delegation standard. And on top of that, we have OAuth 2 for first-party application, which is it's not RFC, it's a specification that allows a direct communication between the application and the IDP. We're going to see in the next slide and in the demo. Thanks to that, we have this API-based approach when the application implement the authenticator journey that comes from the identity provider. So the user experience will be great there. And we are using the OAuth 2 step-up challenge protocol in order to require a step-up step for critical operations. Okay, then I move towards the authorization. We are going to follow the OAuth spec. I'm not going to go deeply there, but OAuth is a working group within the OpenID Foundation that is basically defining the message, to have some, let's say, interoperability between the communication, the policy decision point and policy enforcement point. So it's great to have that interoperability in place. And on top of that, we are going to implement, in this case, ReBAC as the authorization model, which is a relationship-based access control. Okay, this is the first look about all the components that you will find in Agentic AI platform. I did some of them. So we have the identity provider, which is Keycloak, acting as the authorization server. The Agentic AI platform delegates there the authentication and the access delegation step, thanks to the IDC and OAuth 2.1. Then when the user is talking with the agent, not like this, the agent use the LLM service, which you can use GPT-4 or your own or your AI model. In our case, we can use as well a GBDOSS. So this means that we are running the model locally. And then you have the communication between the MCP client and the MCP server. We developed the MCP server for Keycloak. So it is the MCP is exposing the tools towards the agent, and the MCP also supports fine-grained authorization thanks to the integration with OpenFGA. And then we have the communication between the MCP server and the resource with OAuth. And this is, again, I'm simplified idea, but this is the communication between all the components. Now I'm going to complicate a little bit everything. So here I'm adding the, let's say, the specification that comes from the OAuth working group. So here the identity provider, which is Keycloak, is acting also as the policy information point. Then the idea of the Agentic AI platform is basically that we have multiple policy enforcement point at different step of the AI journey. So we have the policy enforcement point, at the agent level. Then we have the policy enforcement point at the MCP server as well. The MCP server will support finding authorization thanks to the OpenFGA, and the OpenFGA will act as the PDP, which is the policy decision point. And the Agentic AI platform is the policy administration point. I mean, it's good. At least my feeling is that it's good to classify each component based on the OpenID working group at the outset, because then it's easy to identify the role of each one. So IDP, first policy information point, second policy information point, and then we have the PDP, which is the policy decision point. I'm simplifying a little bit here the architecture because in our scenario we have a identity aware API gateway that's doing the enforcement and simplifying the architecture, but the overall idea is something like this. Here's when the agent is asking for passkeys. We're going to see this use case just in a few seconds. What else? Okay, I'm going to quickly describe some of the components. Okay, the Agentic AI platform basically supports a standard like I said before, OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. We follow the OpenID OAuth guideline because we are decoupling the authorization towards the OpenFGA server and also implementing policy as code. Then we're implementing multiple policy enforcement point at different stage of the journey. So we are implementing the policy enforcement point at the agent and the MCP server as well. And the idea, as described before, is to adopt zero trust principle because we are trying to implement continuous verification and adaptive security at every stage of the journey. And the last point, as I said before, we're implementing function authorization with relationship-based access control. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about MCP. We implemented the MCP server. We are developing and maintaining that. We support a lot of tools for user, client, application flow, roles, organization, and so on. We support the management of the user, authentication flows, roles, organization, which is super cool. The MCP server acts as the OAuth 2 resource server because we protect the MCP with OAuth, following the MCP specification and recommendation. And then the last one, I believe, and is one of the cool features that we support with the MCP. The MCP support dynamic authorization based on real-time context and ended up triggering the native step up with passkeys for critical operation. Is something super cool. And then the agent is integrated with the Keycloak MCP server. And one of the features that we introduced to the agent is to support triggering the native passkeys authentication when the MCP ended up requiring that. Wow, I don't know why I added this slide. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but when you ended up implementing and developing an agent, basically you end up having this conversation pattern that you have the system message is something that you have on top of that. Then every single time that the user ended up talking with the agent, you ended up having the human message. And then this action or prompt, the agent ended up doing the discovery and then deciding the proper tool that comes from the MCP server. And in this case, you can see here in the point C that when the MCP client executes a tool and the tool is protected by OAuth and requiring an step-up authentication step, is going back again towards the agent, and the agent, in our case, is able to trigger the step-up authentication. It's look crazy, complex, but we're going to see in a demo that is quite easy to follow, to understand. But here is the communication between the agent and the MCP in order to have this kind of zero trust principle. Here is some screenshot about the Agentic AI portal and the agent, and this is how the agent ended up triggering the passkeys, the native passkeys authentication. Cool, the best part. So we're going to see the demo. We are going to cover the use case for listing, deleting a user. I'm not going toward this sequence diagram. You will find in the article in Medium that I ended up writing, but it's quite easy to follow. You have here at the agent level the first policy enforcement point based on scopes, if they're more related to the access delegation to the agent, in order to we have the capability to filter in the tools. Then we have the tool execution, the communication between the agent and the MCP server. In this case, the MCP server will require a step up. Here we have the error response. The agent is able to identify the step up error and trigger this native passkeys authentication. So this is why you have this direct communication between the agent and the user. There is no redirection to another place. And then easy peasy with a new token, the agent ended up executing the tools again, and this new token have the proper level of authentication. And finally, we have defining authorization between the MCP server and the FGA platform. So far, so good. Let me jump into the details of the demo. Nope. Cool. So let me here show quickly the demo. This is a typical federation, IDC federation with a relation to the browser. So we are in the Agentic AI platform. The idea is to show the standards behind the scenes. So far we have two models, the GPT-OSS and GPT-4. I don't have enough time, so I'm going to use GPT-4 because it's faster. Because the other one I'm running locally, the GPT-OSS. So I'm going to use GPT-4 just for the sake of the demo at the time. We have the connection with the Keycloak MCP server, and then let me open the identity console. Behind the scenes, the console is talking with Keycloak, the same as the agent, but talking with the Keycloak MCP server. So I'm going to try to list the users. As you know, the agent using the LLM and the MCP client is talking with the MCP server, doing the discovery of the tool, then the execution of the tool, because the agent is allowed to do that, and the user has the proper right. We are seeing the user information. Then I'm going to get the user details let me pick up Daniel Williams. Same thing, agent talking with the MCP server, discovery, getting the proper tool and executing. The agent has the proper scopes, and then the user has the proper rights. And then when I try to delete the user, the MCP server will request a step up, and then the agent will implement the OAuth 2 step up ceremony with native passkeys. Cool. So here's the tool that I want to execute for that user. Then I'm going to trigger native login with passkeys. You can see here the user experience is great. The application is able to talk directly with the IDP in order to implement the authentication flow. In this case, is passkeys. Passkeys. I haven't talked about passkeys. Okay, passkeys. I believe that everyone knows about passkeys. It's a phishing-resistant authentication mechanism. Is the alternative for password, and one of the cool features is that the application ended up using one of the user verification mechanisms that come from the device, could be face, touch, or ping, and the user experience is great. I'm approving. The agent is executing again the delete, and so far so good. The operation was done because again, I get a new access token with the proper level of authentication, and then the MCP server, when validating the ACR, and he's knowing that the passkeys authentication was done, and this is why the agent is allowed to delete the user. If I refresh here, Daniel should be gone. Cool. Okay, everything is working properly. I could do a lot of things with the agent, perhaps listing the authenticator, listing the users, creating authentication flow, a lot of crazy things so far. We are supporting a lot of tools with the agent, but the main idea of the presentation was to cover the security aspect of the Agentic AI platform. So this is one of them. As you can see here, requiring a step up with passkeys within the same application, thanks to the OAuth 2 for first party application is great, and the user experience and the security with passkeys is awesome. So I believe I don't have more time, but okay, let me jump back to the presentation. Okay, so this slide, basically, I ended up adding this one as the last one because, again, we have a ton of RFC and new spec in the Agentic AI space. Here I'm just describing some of them. So in our case, in my case, I'm not using dynamic client registration, or this one is an spec, it's a draft yet, is OAuth specific client registration for first party use or something like that. Again, I'm not using those because I'm in a first party scenario, so the enterprise register in advance all the clients, all clients. In my case, there is no need for token exchange because I have one MCP server. But again, if you have multiple MCP server, you can use the token exchange for exchange token for one client to the other one. I'm not implementing the OAuth 2 protected resource metadata because in my case, the MCP server knows how to talk with the agent knows how to talk with the agent. For the authorization case, I'm not implementing the O2 rich authorization RAR. Again, my idea is to simplify defining authorization thanks to OpenFGA and the delegation there for authorization. I something that I'm not explaining in details because behind the scenes I have the integration between Keycloak authorization model with OpenFGA with the customization that we ended up developing. This is why we can apply the fine-grained authorization based the roles, organization, groups directly, talking with the OpenFGA. And the last one, identity assertion authorization grant. Again, we are in a single trust domain with one IDP, so we don't have the need to have cross IDP single sign-on. But if you are in that case, you can play with that spec in order to have some kind of cross single sign-on when you are dealing with multiple IDP. But again, in my scenario, I have one IDP in one trust domain in an enterprise scenario. I'm losing my voice, so I should be the last one. Cool. So, well, those are the articles that I ended up writing. The first one is related to the Agentic AI, talking about the standard and the platform and all the standard that we have seen today. The second one is more related to native authentication and the OAuth for first-party application standard. My feeling on that is, again, in the Agentic AI scenario, we are going to have a lot of scenarios without a browser, or in this case, we want to do dynamic authorization in order to follow the zero trust principle. So it's great to have an easy way to do the step up in this API-based approach. So this is why I'm pushing towards the adoption of this standard. Again, we need an API-based authentication without the traditional redirection. So this is why we ended up implementing this standard within Keycloak. And the last one, so there's some links to some of the RFC. Okay, this is all. Again, thank you all for having the opportunity to talk about this topic. I love to talk about identity, AI, and Agentic AI platforms. So you can find me on my LinkedIn or social media. I love to discuss and talk about this topic. So again, thank you.